Hello and welcome back to another edition of Viper Bites Thursday Night Football. What a week it has been. We had 2 games on Monday, 2 games on Tuesday. It's Wednesday. There's no game. So that's why we are coming at you tonight to give you a little bit of a preview of the San Francisco 49ers, who are 8-6 coming off a win against the Atlanta Falcons 31-13 last week, and the Tennessee Titans, who are 9-5, who dropped a close one to the Pittsburgh Steelers 19-13 last week. Now, again, this is another one of those key pivotal type matchups here this week as the 49ers, they are in the battle for the wild card there, holding on to the 6th seed there in the NFC West. While the Titans, they're sitting comfortable leading the division there. Indianapolis Colts, they're knocking on the door. They need this win as much as any team in the league to keep the Colts off them here this week. The Colts, they've got the Arizona Cardinals this week. So another matchup to be looking forward to on Sunday. But let's dive into this one here right now. Let's talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, who's got that $1 million smile and that $4 arm. Now, currently, Jimmy G, he is the QB 18 for fantasy. And while he has flashed at times this year, he's been rather ordinary for much of the season, despite having some of the best collection of weapons in the entire National Football League to work with. He didn't have to do much last week against Atlanta. Look, he only had to throw for 235 yards. He only had to throw for 1 touchdown to secure that W. But look, 3,172 passing yards. That actually sits 13th in the NFL amongst all quarterbacks. That kind of blows my mind here right away. Jimmy Garoppolo, top 13 passer. That does not roll off the tongue very well. You know what else kind of surprised me? His yards per attempt is right up there with the best. He averages 8.5 yards per attempt. However, he's not asked to pass the ball a whole lot. 252 passes this year, 252 completions, might I add, as the 49ers remain committed to the run, even with guys like Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle all in the fold. Now, Elijah Mitchell, he was ruled out early this week. That means Jeffrey Wilson will get a chance to improve on his 110-yard rushing performance from last week. He did that on 21 carries. Now, San Francisco, they are comfortable with Wilson having that workload. Last week, RB3 for fantasy purposes. But you know what? Things get a little tighter this week. Temper those expectations, as the Titans are one of the top-ranked defenses at defending fantasy backs this season, allowing only 18.26 fantasy points per contest. And over the last 4 weeks, they've been even better, allowing less than 12 fantasy points per 2 running backs. Looking straight at the matchups, the 49ers, they may choose to attack through the air, as the Titans, although they've been much better of late defending the pass, have given up points to opposing wide receivers. Now, when you've got a wide receiver like Deebo Samuel, you need to take advantage of every mismatch that he creates on the field. He doesn't just create mismatches for himself. He creates those mismatches for his teammates. Now, we talked about how these Titans, how they are good against the run, but they have surrendered points to opposing receivers. 41 points per contest. They've allowed 16 receiving touchdowns to the position, which is like top 5 in the league. But here's the thing. Deebo Samuel, he isn't just your ordinary wide receiver. Not only does he lead the league in yards per reception at 17.8, and that's amongst all receivers with 25 or more passes, catches there or whatever. But here's where things get freaky. If you take all players with 25 or more carries, Deebo Samuel still leads the lot with 6.9 per carry average so far this season. Look, despite only having 61 receptions, 61 receptions, he has produced 1,088 yards receiving thus far this season to go along with the 5 receiving touchdowns. He also has another 7 touchdowns in the run game and another additional 269 rushing yards. So when we look at the other receivers here that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have to work with, the first name that comes to mind as the receiver, not tight end, is Brandon Ayuk. Ayuk, he was pretty much invisible for most of the season, but in weeks 11 through 15, he has been the wide receiver 17, helping him climb all the way up to wide receiver 46 on the 2021 fantasy campaign. When you throw as little as the 49ers do, and you're competing with both Samuel and Kittle for those touches, those targets, You need to make the most of your opportunities. In 3 of the last 5 contests, Ayuk has double-digit fantasy production, but he is coming off a 2-target performance last week. Now, if you want to get sneaky, you want to keep getting freaky, Juwan Jennings, he had another touchdown last week, and he's a low-key average 8 fantasy points per game since week 12. And you know what? This just has one of those sneaky type feels. But you know what? Who's not sneaky that everyone needs to be paying attention to, including the Titans? I guarantee he's circled on their game plan right now. George Kittle. Man, has he been good these last 3 weeks? I mean, real good. I mean, 91.3 fantasy points since week number 12. If it wasn't for Mark Andrews kind of go lockstepping with him and matching him along the way, by the way, Kittle's still tops in that category, the next closest tight end, they're like 34 points behind, and that's Rob Gronkowski. That is insane to me right now. He's averaging 10 more fantasy points per game over this period of time than the third best tight end. Look, Tennessee is 6th in the NFL in fantasy points allowed to the tight end position, allowing only 8.96 per game. But George Kittle, he is playing at a different level. Last week was his worst fantasy statistical week since week 12, and he still produced 15 fantasy points on only 6 receptions, and he only had 93 yards. I say only because the previous 2 weeks, he combined for 3 touchdowns and at least 150 receiving yards. If this game stays close, and it should, Kittle may flirt with that 150-yard number one more time. Now let's flip this script. Let's head over to the Tennessee sideline here, and let's talk about what they're dealing with, because they've been getting maybe some bodies back here just in time. Now, we mentioned that tough loss to Pittsburgh. They really needed that win last week. Didn't get it, so they're looking to rebound here. And Ryan Tannehill, despite not having the likes of Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Julio Jones for an extended portion of the season, he is still sitting as the QB 14 with 227 fantasy points. Look, his numbers, they aren't that impressive. 3,118 passing yards. That trails Jimmy Garoppolo. That trails Mac Jones. That trails even Ben Roethlisberger, who I like to make fun of more than any other quarterback. Even last week, 153 yards against the Steelers. Well, that is ungood. His 14 touchdowns is average at best, and his 14 interceptions, again, ungood. Now, here's the kicker. His 7 rushing touchdowns, that makes that 14 look more like 21. And I know math, and that's how that kind of adds up. That makes it look much, much better. Now, Derrick Henry, he may come back week 18, so don't hold your breath there. I was kind of hoping he'd come back for my fantasy playoffs here this week. That's not going to happen. Now, D'Onta Foreman, he ran for 108 yards and adding another 27 in the passing game, while Dontrell Hilliard, he was pretty good himself. He saw 9 carries, making the most of them, 5.4 yards per carry, and adding up to 49 total yards. Let's look at what Foreman has done since joining the Titans back on November 7th. Look, remember Adrian Peterson in Tennessee? Neither do I. Nobody does. We've chosen to forget that period of time. I think he's in Seattle. Is that still true? Well, whatever. We'll find out a little bit later. Now, in 6 games, Foreman has averaged 4.5 yards per carry and produced 456 yards on 85 combined touches. That's been very solid in the absence of Derrick Henry. Now, we talked about Tannehill, what he hasn't been able to work with. Well, help may be on its way this week in the form of A.J. Brown, who was activated kind of from the IR earlier this week. He may or may not be ready to step on the field on Thursday. That is still to be determined. He is working with the trainers. He's working with the strength staff. It is one thing to say you're ready. It's another thing to be out there for 60 minutes and contribute. But you know what? None of the other wide receivers on Tennessee have been contributing since A.J. Brown's absence. So you know what? That 615 yards receiving that he has in 10 games, that is still the team high. And maybe arguably his absence is more damaging to this Titans team than Derrick Henry's, as at least the Titans have been able to run somewhat in Henry's absence. Now, not only is A.J. Brown a possibility this week, Julio Jones, who left last week's game early with a hamstring, water is wet. Julio Jones is hurt. Hamstring, soft tissue. These things are starting to add up. He may be able to step on the field on Thursday as well. He went through a full practice here on Wednesday. So, you know what? Wouldn't that be something if both Julio Jones and A.J. Brown would be available for this critical matchup for the Titans? Jones is second in receiving with 369 yards for the Titans in just 8 games. Let's put this way. A.J. Brown leads his team, 10 games played. Julio Jones, second in receiving, 8 games played. That is how bad it has been since they've been gone. Now, with the top 2 targets missing for a considerable portion of the season so far, the passing duties have taken a kind of a, how do you want to put this? A degree by committee here. Neck, Westbrook, a key in there. Chester Rogers, Marcus Johnson sprinkled in there. He had a game. Who else? I don't know what else Tennessee has. Jeremy McNichols, Anthony Fergster, who we'll talk about in a second. There's been some McCole Pryor there. He's kind of factored in there a little bit. You know what? I'll save us all some time and not talk with the guys who haven't been contributing. And let's just hope that both A.J. Brown and Julio Jones are back in the lineup this week and able to produce. Now, I did kind of mention Anthony Fergster as one of those guys I didn't really want to talk about, but I needed to put a tight end in this preview. If he kind of slides in as that de facto number 1 tight end. But look, 26 catches, 198 yards is hardly fantasy relevant. Oh man, what could have been when Jonnu Smith departed. I had such high hopes for Anthony Fergster, and that has not come to fruition so far this season. And I don't see it happening anytime soon. With that being said, this has been your Week 16 Thursday Night Football preview. Make sure to head over to fantasypoints.com, enter that promo code 21 or 22 Vipers 10. Save some money on that subscription. One of the best pound for pound sites out there right now. And as always, hit that thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button on the Vipers Network. If you're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, Anchor, whatever that may be, take a second, rate and review the show. And as always, hit me up on Twitter at Matt Donnelly FF. You got starts and sits, waiver questions, whatever that may be, dynasty questions going forward. Hit me up. I'm more than willing to help. And until next time, we got a crazy week. We got this matchup here on Thursday. We got 2 on Saturday. We got a Sunday night football matchup, and we got another Monday night one coming your way. So stay tuned for plenty more coming down this week.